Welcome to Unit 53, Indian Administration, Continuity and Change. Objectives: Parliamentary Ethics, Countering Corruption, and Indian Administration Transition. The character and requirements of the regime shaped Indian public administration during the colonial rule after independence. The context of administration changed radically as the government, in a situation of resource constraint, had to work towards planned socio-economic development in as short a time as possible. Development looks the center stage in Indian administration immediately after the start of independent political life. There is a material, economic, social and politico-ideological context that influence the extent and the nature of governmental involvement in the societal problems solving. Our administration is a vehicle and it is reformulated from time to time to reach the goals. The President, Prime Minister, Ministers, Governor and all other top administrators are to take an oath that all of them must act in accordance with the principles laid down in the Constitution and observe it faithfully. It is a clear indication of the fact that public administration in India is always accountable to the people. From a broader perspective, we can say that our administration is responsible. Whenever a body or a person or public administration is accountable, it indicates that it is responsible. In our parliamentary system of the Westminster model, there exists a chain of responsibility. The Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister, is accountable to the Parliament. The Parliament is responsible to the electorates. The violation or the breach of accountability will result in undesirable consequences. More than 2 centuries ago, Rousseau talked about popular sovereignty, which was supposed to walk through an open general assembly. In representative democracies, members of legislative bodies elected by the people hold their position in trust for their constituents. People expect them to maintain high standards in public life. Constitutionally, legislators also have the function and responsibility of overseeing the executive. The centrality of this function is that maladministration on the part of those in position of power in the executive is under check. It is but natural then that the legislator who performs a watchdog function are themselves expected to be the person of honesty and integrity. In order to be seen and recognized as transparent and creditable institution of service delivery to the people, many parliaments have set ethical standards of behavior for their members and enforce them through self-regulation. The opposition necessarily has to play the role of vigilant, keeping the government on the leash. But it has a very constructive role to play. Indeed, in the British parliamentary system, the senior leaders in the opposition form a shadow cabinet to shadow each member of the government. It keeps government-initiated laws and policies under scrutiny and offers alternative approaches. Often, shadow cabinet members themselves become ministers when the opposition gets to form the government. People of the country should not lose out in terms of delivery of service in a merry-go-round of cyclical partisans' hostility. The rules of procedure for the conduct of business of the houses do contain elaborate provisions concerning orderlessness in business transactions. Members drown one another in their noisy demands projecting issues outside the agenda. Demand suspension of question hour. Do cross-talking. Don't comply with the instructions of the chair. Repeat arguments in debates. not having done homework on the subject of debate, often forces adjournment of the houses from hour to hour, day to day, boycott ministers, pass budget hurriedly without serious debates, glutining important demands for grants. In the process, what suffers is the performance of the parliament in holding the government to account. The people are seriously concerned with the chaotic parliamentary proceedings. Lawmaking is a parliamentary function of legislative bodies. In all parliaments, there are established procedures for making laws. By and large, these procedures concern initiation, introduction, general discussion, committee scrutiny, public consultation, amendments, discussion in the plenary and voting leading to authentication by the President. We also have time-honored rules for legislation compatible to international standards. Today, civil society organizations have tended to become stringent regards how they should be consulted in lawmaking. These organizations can provide invaluable inputs based on their grassroots perception of people's aspiration. It is desirable that any public consultation, including with civil society organization, is done within the framework of parliamentary procedures. We cannot allow lawmaking to be delegated to the civil society with the result that it becomes something in the nature of collective bargaining. The simple reason is that there are many civil society organizations and we should keep ourselves from being tied down by complicated procedures. They need representative character. This apart, such organizations also may have their caprice and partisans orientation. Laws touching as they do millions of people should be formulated without capricious and partisans or orientations. Perhaps India is the only country whose public service have been accorded constitutional status and their rights and privileges have been safeguarded. Article 311 of the Constitution provides a safeguard to a public employee right to be served with a notice to show cause notice before he or she can be dismissed from the service on charge of misconduct, inefficiency or corruption. Such legal and constitutional guarantees, which were intended to protect civil servants from arbitrary actions and unjust administrative decisions, have come to be used as the guardian of corrupt and incompetent bureaucrats. The most unique feature of the provisions of Indian Constitution is Article 312, pertaining to the creation of All India Services, which retain the same prestige and status once accorded to the old ICS. The special characteristic of these services is that although officers are recruited and trained by the union government, they serve both the union and the state government and occupy top policy making and executive positions in both the central and the state governments. Moreover, they cannot be dismissed, removed or reduced in the rank, except for causes and only with the approval of Union Public Service Commission. The other independent bodies for various administrative purposes provided in the Constitution are the Election Commission to conduct elections for various legislative bodies and all elected officers under the Union and the states. The Finance Commission appointed every 5 years for determining the principle of distribution of revenue between the central and state government. The Controller and Auditor General to audit accounts of Union and the state governments, and the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Commissions to look after the welfare of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India. In the Indian administration, there is a system of reservation for different categories such as SC, ST and OBC people. It is a constitutional provision and it is strictly adherent to these categories of people always get preference over the other people or people belonging to the general category. The purpose is to help the upliftment of backward people and to ensure social justice, which has been stated in the preamble to our constitution. The public administration of independent India is to a larger extent a continuation of the civil service created by the British Raj. There were several factors behind this continuation, and one such factor is that the founding father of Free India largely adopted the British parliamentary system, and neutrality, the civil service system adopted by the British rulers, has its relevance in post-independent India. During the British rule, the ICS officers were the servants of British government, but in Free India, the situation has changed completely. Let us quote few words from a critic. The RTI law established by the Parliament is an important landmark in the evolution of our system of governance into a transparent and accountable one. While the law finely and deeply enunciates fundamental rights, they are bounded to be more effort to seek further liberalization. This is because there are numerous items of information that are exempt from disclosure, apart from organizations altogether excluded from the ambit of the law. The exempted items are likely to be ingenuously interrupted by the officialdom so as to negate the intent of the law. The enactment of the Right to Information Act should be seen not as an end of the movement for access to information, but rather as a beginning. The idea of development administration has radically changed the general concept of public administration. The chief aim of public administration is not to collect revenue, maintain law and order, and implement the decisions of the state. The aim is far more crucial. Modern public administration must ensure the development of a prismatic society. The collection of revenue and maintenance of law and order are no doubt important tasks, but no less important is to reach the desired stage of development through the administrative functions. In this respect, it has been observed that in a developing nation, the public administration must prioritize the rapid progress of the economy. Since India is a developing nation, progress can be achieved through a regenerated administrative process. Hence, one of the most important characteristics of Indian public administration is to develop the economy through the judicious use of scarce resources. Since the ministers are temporarily executives, it is not possible for them to shoulder the onerous burden of development. Amartya Sen, in his recent book Development as Freedom, has said that development can be achieved through an elaborated process of expanding the real freedom that people enjoy, and public administration is a part of that process of expansion of freedom. Sen maintains development requires removal of major sources of unfreedom, poverty, as well as tyranny, poor economic opportunities, as well as systematic social deprivation, neglect of public facilities, as well as intolerance or overactivity of repressive state. The crux of the issue is that Bureaucracy is not directly accountable to electorate, but it's accountable to the legislature and executive has been a well-established concept in India. Naturally, the public administration is to bear the major part of burden of development. In India, the development administration is not confined within the four walls of implementation of policies. India's is a planned economy. Naturally, all aspects of planning, programs, policy formulation, projects and implementation of decisions are all associated with planning. In India, there is a Central Planning Commission. The Prime Minister is the head of the Planning Commission, but he is a political and, in the sense, temporary executive. For this reason, all decisions regarding plans as well as development passes through a multi-stage bureaucratic structure. Viewed from this angle, we can say that the major part of development administration falls upon the bureaucracy. Even when there is no existence of planning, development work exists and the administration is at the center of development. A clear example is the US administration. A major part of development work is performed by the public and private administration. Societies have been living with corruption down the decades. We have been bearing the brunt of both systematic corruption and that in high places. With liberalization of the economy and elimination of license Raj, we have considerably divested governmental decision makers of their discretionary powers. This has helped in scaling down systematic corruption to a certain extent. But recently, cases of alleged corruption of Himalayan proportions have come to light. This has been significantly due to the exercise of discretion by authorities in high places in the disposal of natural resources. The judiciary has also since ruled that natural resources should not be disposed of otherwise than through auctions. Irrespective of the ruling dispensation, addressing corruption in high places have always been problematic. In this context, the enactment of Lokpal law assumes importance. The issue central to this legislature is the autonomy of investigating and prosecuting agencies. Reportedly, other measures to counter corruption are under contemplation. Public procurement law, public grievance law. It is unrealistic to assume that enactment of these laws by itself would eliminate corruption. Though ours is a highly over-legislated country, but the track record of our performance in the implementation of enacted laws could be better. It is also important that whatever measures we may take, we should address corruption at its demand and supply side, especially because the unregulated market also is no solution for bribery. There is a nexus in India between the politicians and bureaucrats, and from these nexus has developed the worst type of corruption. In fact, in Indian public administration, there is corruption at all levels. Since both politicians and civil servants are involved, the corruption is unlikely to be uprooted. In the post-independent era, the number of civil servants have increased several times. Several factors are responsible for this growth of bureaucracy. In every country, the number of public servants has increased, and India is not expectation. During the British regime, the spheres of public services was unthinkably limited. The primary duty of civil service was to maintain law and order and to collect revenue. Today, these two main functions remain and the civil servants are to perform additional duties, and this number is quite large. The main area that has increased is the economic functions. India and all other nations are called nations in transition, meaning they are developing nations. They are trying to move from undeveloped or underdevelopment to development, and the burden of this task falls upon the bureaucracy. All these have resulted in an increase of a number of civil servants. There is another reason. The quantity of public service has increased due to rise of democracy. India was ruled from one or very few centers. Today, there is a central government, there are state governments and various types of local governments. The proper management of all these services requires an extensive array of government officers. Indian administration is flexible. India is a developing nation or a state in transition. Naturally, the public administration of such a state cannot be fixed. Political and other issues and subjects change, the public administration also changes. To cope with the changes in various fields, the public administration also changes, and these changes assume the form of reform. They have occurred several administrative reforms. In recent years, several terms have entered into the domain of public administration in India, and one such term is good governance. In order to fulfill the ideas of political system and realize the demands of electorate, the politicians and the top administrators plan for reforming the existing principles and structures of public administration. This process aims at good governance. This is the purpose of public administration, must be to cater the interest of people of all walks of life. The idea of good governance is a potent factor of reforming administration. In the 1990s, when India launched the policy and principles of liberalization, it was strongly felt that the administrative system of India is required to be reformed so that the liberalization of economy can achieve desired goals. Today, globalization is a hot issue. Different nation states of the world today are no longer separated from each other. The nation states are physically or geographically separated from each other. But from the standing point of economy, culture and other aspects, the nations are dependent on each other, and this interdependency has necessitated changes in the administrative system. This is called the flexibility of Indian public administration. Moreover, Indian administrators borrow administrative principles from other countries to improve our administrative system, and which the causes of the flexibility of public administration. Moreover, the social structure and the relation among people have undergone changes. There are tensions among different classes, groups and religious sects. For the proper management of all these, government officers are necessary. Above all, abnormal rise of democratic feeling has been a cause of tension, and for the management of these, greater number of police is required. India is a developing state, and in that sense, according to Gunnar Myrdal, is a soft state. Myrdal has defined the term in the following way. The term soft state is understood to comprise all the various types of social indiscipline, which manifest themselves by deficiencies in legislation and in particular law observance and enforcement, a widespread disobedience, by the public officials on various levels to rule and directives handed down to them. This is the general picture of the developing world states.